So I've been asked to talk a bit about the state of the industry and state of indie games in particular. You know what, we'll just get started. Been asked to talk a bit about the state of the industry, state of indie games. There's a few things I would like to talk about. There's a few things I could talk about. I actually don't know the community here very well, which is rare. I normally travel the world. I meet lots of developers everywhere around the world. So before we get started, I'd love to have a little bit of an idea of who is in the room and what y'all do and what y'all are up to. So could I just by show of hands, who here is an independent developer? Who here is an independent developer with a shipped commercial title? Who here is would call themselves like AA, like say team size 20 plus? Okay, AAA? Indie? The number of indies changed between those two questions. That's really odd. Some of you gave up in the meanwhile. Students. What is all the rest doing here? It's early. Just somebody who didn't raise their hand. What do you do?
Mobile games.
Mobile games. Those don't count as indie games here.
We have a city from Belarus, and it's not.
Okay, cool. Mobile games. Yeah, okay. Let's see. So not a lot of students, not a lot of aspiring developers. Most of you are already making games professionally. That's awesome. Wow, cool. So there's a few talks I could give in that case. The state of the industry is obviously a big one, and I'm sure you all have been noticing, but state of the industry is kind of a messy one at the moment. Used to be pretty solid, but about a year ago, economy kind of crashed. I don't know if any of you are looking for investment, but that's kind of been a shit show. Am I allowed to curse here, Lerka? Yeah. Sorry. Oh, thank fuck. Industry has kind of been in a rough spot. Now, I don't know if you've all been watching that, but Apple has been in a weird spot. Apple Arcade existed, then it didn't exist, then it kind of exists. Now they're kind of funding, not really funding. If you're on Apple, there used to be a lot more money. Android, you'll find there never was much money from the platform, but there is. If you can launch a game on Android and have it do really well, it still continues to do really well, so not much change there. Xbox, Game Pass, I don't know if any of you have done Game Pass deals, but same thing, like they're sort of restructuring that whole thing. It's a little messy. PlayStation doesn't really know what to do with its money. Nintendo has been starting to fund games. That's nice. And if any of you are doing Nintendo games, congratulations. PC remains whatever it is. You release a game, make sure it's good. Publishers, less money, less risk. Kind of a rougher situation. Who has signed any games with publishers lately? Nobody? Has anybody been trying, pitching? Are you all self-funded mostly? Self-funded? So no publishing deals?
No.
How big is your team, can I ask? How big is your team? Like how many people are you?
It was up to 19 a few months ago, so unfortunately we're
shrinking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right now we are.
I mean, shrinking is pretty much the theme of the industry right now. I think that's probably true for most studios, but most of the conversations I've had are about downsizing, restructuring. A lot of the consultancies I'm doing are about how do we keep our crew on board when we don't actually have money to keep them on board, or how do we keep small projects, how do we do work for hire. I'm sure those things should be fairly recognizable in the region here. Work for hire remains an iffy one, because when you look at work for hire, there's a lot of places that can do it cheaper than you probably can, which is also what you're seeing now towards the east. So when they asked me to talk about the state of the industry, I kind of thought it would be a really depressing talk, and here we are. It kind of is, because things are a little rough right now. Now that said, that doesn't mean that there's not lots of opportunities, because there remain forever lots of opportunities. This is the games industry. It doesn't matter if things are looking bad, people play video games. They do. And that's been wonderful. So I'm seeing also, despite all of these troubles, I'm seeing a lot of successes, smaller successes that will continue studios, that will allow studios to grow until this recession kind of comes to an end or starts growing again. So it's not necessarily all doom and gloom, but right now it can be rough for a lot of game studios, and that's sort of the overall story that I'm hearing. The two responses that we always get in games are always the same. right? Consolidation, which means studios start working together, co-development, studios working together on larger projects or trying to get larger projects, and work for hire. Work for hire, like said, is kind of an iffy state, but the consolidation, studios being acquired, that's a really big opportunity. So if you are a slightly larger studio, I'm not sure, but a lot of studios that I've talked to in that sort of like 50 plus range, they're looking at M&A, mergers, acquisitions, stuff like that. Might be a good conversation to have with your studio, whether that's something you are interested in. If you have any questions about that, I help with those as well, so feel free. I think what I'm going to do is, I'm seeing a lot of different responses as I'm talking. So what I'm going to do is, I just genuinely don't think there is one talk I could give that would be useful to all of you. So instead, I'm just going to have 10 slides, and you're just going to tell me what to put on the slides, and then I'm going to spend the rest of the 30 minutes talking to you about what you put on the slides. Is that a deal? Let's do that. Anything you want me to talk about? Any theme, topic, issue that you think should be on slide number 1? Anybody? Raise your hand or just yell at me. Nobody? This is going to be a really short presentation, yo. Sorry? Opportunities. Okay, opportunities. Okay, let's do a few more slides. One is that's a very short presentation. Number 2. Anybody? Somebody's pointing that way. I don't know what that means. Any other topics you want me to talk about? Threats? Trends. Trends. We kind of had a little bit of that, but trends will do. Number 3. Steam. Oh my God. Whew. Okay. Market. Marketing. Indie marketing. Oh, fun. Fun. Okay. Sure. 5. That sounds like a book title, you know that? Somebody should call a book that. Investments. Something made PowerPoint unstable. But, yeah. AI. Oh boy. Okay. I think that's the first time I'm going to be on the record about AI, so that's going to be really fun. Tricks for recession. Yeah. You know what? We'll fold that into trends. I hope I spelled that right. You know, this is the kind of word where you say it a lot and then you realize, like, I don't actually know how to spell this. Does it have 2 C's, 2 S's? Anybody else? We'll try. Okay. Okay. Shall we just continue here? Oh wait, not this one. Wrong slide. Wrong slide. All right. We're good. Okay, cool. 7.
As I see you each DevGAMM, my question is, how do you deal with burnout?
How do you deal with burnout? Ooh, okay. You know what? It's gonna be real weird going from a slide that's just, oh boy, to like, how to deal with burnout. Like, I think my favorite thing about this presentation is trying to figure out the transitions. That's gonna be a rough one. Yeah, go ahead. Main obstacles in the games industry. Okay, you know what? You know what? We'll just go from here. I think that should be enough, right? All right, beautiful. How much time do we have, Lerka?
27 minutes.
Woo! 27 minutes. Oh, yeah, okay. Let's hope PowerPoint doesn't crash. God, I look like a professional. All right, so let's just ignore everything that happened before this, and we're just going to start here, okay? So, my name is Rami Ismail. I'm an independent game developer. I've been in the games industry for about 15 years. I co-founded a game studio called Vlambeer. We're best known for Ridiculous Fishing, which was the game of the year on iOS in 2013. We also did Nuclear Throne, Luftrauser, Super Crate Box, and a number of other IGF award-nominated and winning games. I won the GDC Ambassador Award back in 2018. I spent most of my last decade traveling the world, meeting communities everywhere, trying to figure out how to best make games, how to help people best make games, how to make sure the business of games is coordinated in a way that is useful for all of you, rather than for just people who want to earn lots of money. So, you've made this presentation, and I'm just going to figure out what the hell to do with it right now. And y'all wanted to start with opportunities, which I think is a beautiful topic to start with, because honestly, like, when we're talking about games, this is a field of tremendous opportunity. We work in a weird space, right? We're on the intersection between tech and creativity. And the weird thing about that is that it means that as new opportunities open up, we have a lot of space to play with. Now, we have a slide later talking about a number of those topics. Oh boy. But what I think is important is to sort of realize that there's really two ways of looking at the games industry. There's looking at the games industry from the position of somebody who's been here, and looking at the games industry from the position of somebody who's new here. And they're very different ways of looking. And I think it's really important that you try to distinguish those two. Because I see a lot of developers who are just starting or just showing up, don't have a hit game, might have a studio, 6 people, 8 people, 10 people, and they're trying to play the big game. And you will always lose at the big game. And the reason you will always lose at the big game is because it's somebody else's game already. So if you look at our games and you say, oh hey, Nuclear Throne, we can make a game like Nuclear Throne, or Enter the Gungeon did that, or Dead Cells, or Slay the Spire, were all inspired directly or indirectly by Nuclear Throne. The trick is they try to make something else out of it. And too often, especially in communities where development is younger or where development is newer, I see that people try to replicate the big successes. And that only works up until a certain level, because at some point you're competing with the people who made those successes. And the chances of you beating them are very small. I see people trying to play the market. They try to get access to analytics and data, and they realize really quickly that the amount of data a large studio can buy, a large studio has access to, is far larger than the data you can get. So when you're looking at opportunities, don't try to look for the thing that other people are doing. Look what the lessons of those other things are. What are you seeing? What kind of behavior are they aiming towards? Are they aiming for casual markets? And what in the casual market are they aiming for? And then try to aim there, but in a different way. How long does a game take you to make? How long does it take you? Average game? 7 months? 7 years. Mobile?
What is the question?
How long does it take you to make one game? Oh.
It depends. My last one took probably 5 years, but it was a few months.
All right. So long and mobile.
Yeah.
Did it go well?
No.
No. Faster. Tempo. Okay. Cool. Yeah. That's kind of what happens. Everybody. I did the same thing. But when you get to this space, actually a good way to survive is move fast, and don't try to replicate other successes. You will always lose at replicating other successes. If you're going to replicate something, make sure you're taking the core of it, the heart of it, and move forward. The other opportunity in games remains, even with the recession, it remains that there is money in games. And there's always money flowing into games, because there's always people playing games. Even when COVID happened originally, we thought, oh my God, it's going to be terrible. And it turns out that when everybody's locked in their house, they buy video games. Because what the hell else were they going to do, right? So we're actually, in the tech industry, we're in a hard spot because people spent more money on digital entertainment during the recession. And the way money works is everybody thought, well, if you just throw more money at it, it'll keep making money. And then the pandemic came to an end. And then people started spending less. And now everybody with money is like, oh shit, what happened? which I feel like anybody could have figured that one out, but I guess I'm not in charge of the big money. So there is still money flowing in. That means, though, that the way you want to make games is you want to make sure that your risk, your financial risk, as far as possible, is not with you. So if you're going to be making a game, you're going to be working on it for years, try to get funding a lot earlier. Try to get funding a year in. Pitch, talk to people, get that vertical slice ready, that prototype. Make sure that quickly as possible, the risk moves from your studio to somebody who can fund you. Because as soon as it's with somebody who can fund you, the rest is not that important to you anymore. You just have to finish the game, you have to make sure it's good. Then for the next game, you can get funded again, right? If you're self-funded, it's a different ballgame, but hopefully if you're self-funded, you're at the point where your games are earning enough money, or you've made enough games that the cumulative of that money is enough to keep working. And that's really your goal. Your biggest opportunity is to just make things that will make you enough passive income where you don't have to work towards it, but where your games are just making enough money, just sitting there, that you can focus on making the game you want. And until you're at that point, you should be working with funding. You should be working with external funding, because otherwise you're spending your money and you're spending your time. And why would you? Let somebody else pay for it. I've heard there's some publishers in the room. You know, orange ones. Like, oh, he's hiding now. So, for opportunities, your two opportunities really are, consider the way you're looking at the industry. From where are you looking? What is your unique position in this industry? What is your unique talent in this industry? People try to replicate too much. Look at the games that are hits right now, the games that are coming out, and tell me that they are copies. They're not. They're never copies. Every game that always makes it is something with a clever twist, something that is different, something that is unique, something that could only be because that specific team had an idea to do something strange. That's how hit games get made. If you just want to coast, you just want to make small games that earn enough money to continue, yeah, copy. It works. It works just fine. Copy other stuff. You'll make enough money to continue. But if you want to try and get that money that will allow you to just make your own ideas, make your own games, make original content, you're going to have to take risk. Risk is a requirement for that type of success. And there's a lot of risk. That's a pretty good transition. I shouldn't have called it out. Now it's a bad transition. There's a lot of risk in the industry right now. And the recession obviously is a big part of that. Now we've talked about the trends a little, and basically what you could hear in my intro when I was just trying to figure out who you all are, things aren't great. Things aren't great, especially for funding. So when I just say, hey, get funding, that is actually harder than ever right now. There's publishers that are funding, but depending on what kind of game you're making, your budget might vary a lot. Now, I don't know what kind of budget ranges you all are in. Very frequently, you have sort of like the up to 100K, you have like 100 to 500K, you have 500K to like, say, 2.5 mil, and then you have 2.5 mil. Now, whichever one of those you fall in, all of them have gotten more complicated with the exception of the 2.5 mil one. That one is just exactly the same because that entire part of the industry is completely detached from reality, right? It just does its own thing. People invest lots of money. Those games do come out. They throw $500,000 marketing at it. Shit's fine. But the other ones are harder. So up to 100K-ish, usually 70, let's say up to 120K usually, right? Up to 120K, you have lots of competition. There's hundreds and hundreds of games pitching to companies like Fellow Traveler and other indie game publishers that sort of operate in that budget. They're lovely. A lot of mobile games tend to fall in that range as well, if you even get funding for your mobile game, because frequently indie game mobile game publishers have very different deals. But up until 120K, things are harder mostly because of competition. There's a lot of pressure on that part of the industry, and if you want to do something, you want to be able to prove that you're going to do it with both a good projection of your revenue, right? Where do I fit? What market research do we have? If you're going to be on mobile, you need numbers. You're just going to need numbers. There's nothing else will help you. 120K, even up to 120K, you want the numbers of your game. You want to be able to prove it. If you don't have them, you can try. You should try, honestly, but it's not going to work. You should try anyway, right? Now that next part, 120 to say $500,000. Let's put that together into one thing. 120 to $500,000. That's your prime indie range right now. A lot of indie games are releasing in that area. In that area, the biggest thing people need is they want two things. They want to know what the feeling of the game is. How does it work? How does it feel? How will it get the audience interested? Too many designers, developers, programmers forget to put that in there. I see so many pitches that are like, oh, we have this cool mechanic, it works like this and that and that, and at no point do they tell you why I should give a shit. That's a really fucking bad pitch. I want you to tell me why your game is going to be interesting. What I'm going to feel, what players are going to feel, and the best way to do it is just remember, for a pitch, you answer 5 questions. The question is, who, which is you, and explain what about you makes you the right team to be making this game, right? Saw which opportunity, so who, saw which opportunity, why are you making this game? What did you see that nobody else saw? Why are you making this game when nobody else is making it? What is the thing that is going to keep people playing this game? Why are they going to want to play this game? And it's almost a question that you're asking in that. And the answer to that question is what? Who saw what opportunity, saw which opportunity to make what? And what is your game? Explain your game to me. What is it? What is your game? How does it work? Why is it going to work the way you said? Finally, you're going to say, how can you benefit? How can you as a publisher make money? How are you going to earn enough to make sure that your investment is going to be worth it? Most publishers are going to look to triple their investment. Triple. So if you come in with a budget and it's $500,000, you better make sure you can convince me that your game is going to make 1.5. And if you can't, you have a bad pitch. Because that's how I'm going to look at it, right? And then finally, the final question you're going to answer is, and what do we need to make that game happen? What's your budget? What's your timeline? If your timeline extends past 2 years, going to be rough at the moment. Not a lot of people taking bets in the past 2-year range, right? But under 2 years, it is quite doable, right? So, your two opportunities are, it is a strange time. It is easier than ever to try and come up with something and say, hey, only we could make this. There's a lot happening, so standing out is more valuable right now. The second one is, even though money is tighter than before, there's still a lot of money in games. Try to get there earlier. That's how you survive this recession, is get somebody else to fund your game. If you cannot do that, you're going to be in trouble right now. So try and get external funding. Whether it's Game Pass, whether you're reaching out to PlayStation, whether you're reaching out to a publisher, grants, local grants, funds, I don't care. Any external money you can bring in is better than using your own money, because if this recession continues, eventually you're going to start burning your own money and you're going to run out. Eventually you're going to run out. I really wish there was anything super intelligent to say about Steam, but the honest truth is Steam just works the way Steam always has. It's a game of algorithms. It's a game of like trying to know when you want to do what. It has been proven that a lot of their demo events, Next Fest, stuff like that, are very good for eyeballs. If you want eyeballs, make sure you're using those opportunities. Remember that you can generally only use them once or a limited amount of times. So try to be very strategic at when you're using opportunities when you're launching on Steam. Early access is a really weird one right now. The general public opinion on it has become a lot more negative over the years. So early access really is only for if your game is severely content heavy. So if the core of your game is relatively small and people can start playing the game completely at a fairly small stage, and really what you're adding is content, more levels, more enemies, more player characters, more weapons, more whatever, then early access is good, but you want to keep that loop very tight. Update, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks max, new update, right? Anything that takes longer than that, if you see it succeed, you're looking at an example of survivorship bias. There's very few games in early access right now that do well. The only way you're going to pull it off is that tight loop. New content. Just keep bringing new content. And if you can keep bringing new content, and that's what your game thrives on, it's a good idea. So if you're making a roguelike, you're making a multiplayer game, you're making anything that is quickly replayable, that is very content heavy, consider early access. If it's anybody, I came across a team the other day that was doing a strategy game that wanted to do early access. I'm like, how are you going to add content? Like, strategy is one of the hardest things to add content to because of all the balancing that is involved. And they wanted to early access that. I'm like, I don't think that's a good idea. And I don't think it is. They're still going to try, so I'll be able to tell you whether it was a good idea sometime in the future. So, marketing will forever remain one of the hardest topics of independent game development because there's a lot of us nowadays. When I started, there were 50 of us. So marketing was, there was a dude who would just put on a pink suit and then walk through a conference, and then people would ask, why do you have the pink suit? And he would say, well, because it gets you to talk to me. Anyway, do you want to check out my indie game? Very good marketing back in the days. Nowadays, it doesn't work anymore. There's a lot of games launching, and our biggest enemy as independent game developers when it comes to marketing is publishers. And the biggest opportunity when it comes to independent games marketing is actually also publishers. It's really smart. They're their own problem. They fix their own problem. The problem is they're better at marketing than us. And the reason for that is they have more money and they have more games. So they can keep their connections with the press, with the influencers, they just keep going. If you make a game, you take 5 years, you take a year, you take 2 years, you're going to have something to talk about every 2 years. If you're a publisher, you have 10 games a year. So you have some news all the time. So we can't compete with them. So the best marketing you can do, get a publisher or a marketing agency. That is by far the easiest way to do it. If you're working with a publisher, they usually work with an external marketing agency. Very few publishers actually do their own marketing. If you find a marketing agency like Evolve or Stride or Pop Agenda or any of them, that is going to be much better for you than doing it yourself. If you're going to do it yourself, the things you want to take care of is you want to make sure that your game is standing out and that your messaging is standing out. Your messaging, again, is very much about how you communicate your game. And the one thing I really hope that none of you ever do is just, facts are not that important. I'm not saying lie, but if I tell you, okay, I have an amazing game for you, it has 12 different characters. That doesn't mean shit. It just means that there are 12 characters. Are they interesting? Are they weird? Are they, do they play differently? A lot of y'all try to describe your game when they're doing marketing. And that's not the thing people want. Look up any popular game and look how they describe it. And you'll see it's usually about the feeling, about how you're playing, about the atmosphere that you're playing it in. It's not about what it is. What it is part of it. It will usually have the genre in there, right? That's useful. But for most of the best games out there, you will see that the marketing is very much about the feeling. And so it means that when you have adjectives, a good game, the word good is an adjective, right? Those modifying words too often are just useless words. So when it comes to communication, one thing that really makes a difference, and I cannot emphasize this enough, in consultancies I've seen it over and over again, check those adjectives. And when you check those adjectives, imagine what the opposite word of it is. So say a good game, right? What's the opposite of good? Bad. Would anybody ever say this is a bad game? No. If not, then there's no point to saying it. Because nobody's going to say bad. If I tell you, hey, I'm going to sell you this car, it's a good car, are you convinced now? No, because nobody would say it's a bad car. That's ridiculous. And we keep forgetting that we're selling stuff. Very frequently, we keep forgetting that we need to be able to replace the game with a car and then still have the argument we're making make sense. So the other thing a lot of people do is they try to, when they're pitching, which is also selling, right? We're selling to a publisher, they'll start with their budget. They'll start with like, okay, we need $500,000. And that's awesome, but here's the thing. If I start and I have a car for you and I say like, well, this is a $15,000 car, that's not a cheap car, right? So I want the car to be good. $15,000 car, okay, and then I go around and I go like, well, it's $15,000 car, you know, the color is, it's a red car. It has 4 wheels, that's nice. It has a steering wheel. There's one mirror on it, the other one is missing. It's gas, and it's relatively cheap to drive. Now all you've heard is that there's a mirror missing. Because you're buying a $15,000 car and you don't want the fucking mirror to be missing, right? So when you start with your budget, every slide you do from that point on, the publisher is going to be thinking, okay, it's a $500,000 game. Is what you're telling me this slide worth $500,000? Well, if you wait all the way until the end, the only thing they can do is look at your entire pitch and see if that's worth $500,000, right? So if you end with your budget, you're actually doing a much better pitch than if you start with it. Just purely psychologically. The same way you get taught, if you've ever been in a retail job selling computers or furniture or whatever, they'll tell you don't start with the price. Start by telling your customer, hey, this is how this thing can benefit. Preferably, pick a more expensive thing first. They need a computer that's $500? Okay, start with the $700 one. Explain how it's great. And they're going to go like, well, isn't that a bit much for what I need? And you're like, well, you know what? That's a very fair point. How about this $500 laptop? Now you've sold a $500 laptop, right? Same thing, we are selling. Make sure you're in that mindset, right? When you're publishing, when you're pitching, when you're putting your game on the Steam store, when you're doing marketing, you're selling. What are your unique selling points? How does it stand out? What is special about it? Why should you give a shit? Why should you care? Is this fair value for money? If you have a small game and you're selling it for $15, is your game worth $15 given the competition out there? Is your game actually worth that amount of money? And also, vice versa, if you have a really good looking game and you're selling it for $10, do you think I'm going to buy a really good looking game for $10? Hell no. I don't know what's wrong with your game. Why is it only $10? So pricing is actually kind of tricky and there's no science to it. It's kind of like you just come up with a number and I go, does this feel right? You can test, you can discount, but if you're going to launch your game on Steam, if you're going to launch your game on Steam, launch it a little higher. Whatever the prices you have in mind, go like 20% above that and then just discount it down 20%. Same thing actually on iOS, same thing on Android, just price a little higher if you're doing premium, price a little higher and then discount down. Because it's really hard to go up. It's really hard to tell people, well, you know this $12 game, $15 now. You're going to have all of Reddit on your ass. But if you start $15 and you discount to 12, people are great with it. And a lot of stuff like that is completely unreasonable. You make mobile games? Good luck porting them to PC and not having everybody hate on you. Good luck. Because people say this is a fucking mobile game. You make a PC game and you port it to mobile, everybody's like, oh my god, I can't believe you got it working. Same fucking video game. It's just the order in which you release shit has changed. But perception matters. Because we're selling. So keep that stuff in mind. Investment right now, fairly hard, but there is some good news. The first good news is there's a lovely independent developer named Alan Dang. Alan Dang made a giant list of every indie publisher that you can find out there, including ways to reach them, forums, email, stuff like that. If you don't have that list, write down this name, Alan, A-L-A-N, Dang, D-E-N-J. If you look up Alan Dang's list of video game publishers, you will get a list of over 150 publishers, just free, he maintains it. If you use that list, please find him on Twitter, send him a small thank you, right? Because he's updating the list. Also on that list, you will find QA, you will find localization, you will find all sorts of companies you could work with in your indie game studio. Probably the most valuable thing you will find in the games industry right now. He does it entirely free. When it comes to investment, best way to look for investment is honestly, go find games investment funds. There's a number of them. There's the One Up Fund. There's a ton of them, honestly. Just search for indie game investment or games investment and you'll find plenty. Keep in mind that the ticket sizes usually are a bit larger than most indie games are used to. So while you can get investment for 300K, a lot of them will want to start at 1 million plus. If you're not making a $1 million plus game, make a $1 million plus game. A lot of people go like, how do you do that? And you just do it. The weird thing about that is, I recently helped a team that had never made a game before, two guys from somewhere in Canada. I helped them land a $7 million pitch. And really the only thing we did is we made sure that the thing we pitched was worth $7 million, which means that we needed a team that is worth $7 million, so we started looking. We reached out to some people, saw if they were interested. If we can get this funded, are you on board? They said yes. Okay, we did a little bit of work on the prototype. They invested probably 50 grand, like 50K, into getting the prototype in the place where it needed to be, pitched it, started at 700,000, went up to 2.5. There was enough competition that they ended up at almost 7 mil. The trick with this kind of stuff, it has very little to do with all the things people blame for their pitch failing, right? It has very little to do with your experience level. You don't have experience? I don't give a shit. What I want is I want you to have people on board that have experience. If you can hire those people and you can prove to me that they trust you, okay, cool. They trust you, I trust you, right? I'm going to do some due diligence. I'm going to check whether you're not full of shit. But if you can get those people on board, you can get a producer on board that has shipped 3 AAA games, and they're going to help your indie game? Okay, I guess. Let me look into that producer. You can find an artist that has done like beautiful pixel art across 2 or 3 shipped titles. Okay. So people always laugh at the idea of, oh, then just make $1 million game. No, make $1 million game. You just need to make sure that your pitch checks out. So if you're coming to me with $1 million game, your prototype needs to look like you're working on $1 million game. I don't want to see a prototype that looks like a $20,000 game, a $100,000 game. I want to see that it's correct, right? Because that's what the pitch is. You're selling a dream. It's not real yet. You just have to prove that it's very likely that the dream is going to work out. How many minutes do I have? 2 minutes, Jesus Christ. Oh boy. All right, so real quick, just so it's out of the way. Technology has always been an opportunity for games. And I don't think there's any difference here. I think there is opportunity to do really cool shit with some of this stuff. I think, genuinely, there's really cool opportunity with the blockchain. I'm fairly sure there are cool ways to do things that we cannot do right now in games with blockchain. I just think those people selling an hour full of shit. And if they're not, I haven't come across the right people, right? And if you're here, feel free to come talk to me, because I would love to talk to you and hear what idea you have that is unique and different, because I think there's an opportunity there. Blockchain is being used internally in companies where there's no public ledger for a decade, and it works super fine there. AI, same thing. The way it's being used now is the easiest, cheapest, dumbest way of using AI. But we've been using AI in game development forever. We've been using it to like put fucking trees in our levels. We've been using procedural generation for all sorts of stuff. This is no different, but we need to find a way to apply it fairly and in a way that is good for us. It's good for our artists, it's good for our writers, it's good for our teams, good for our programmers. Metaverse we're not even going to talk about because I have 1 minute and it would just be 1 minute of cursing. VR and AR, they're cool. They're cool. I don't know how they're going to do, but they're just going to be. Like, I love what you can do in it. I think there's a market for it. It's going to keep evolving. I don't know. I only have 1 minute. You know what? These two are the same. This is the same fucking slide. The main obstacle in the games industry is you. It's you. It's always you. Let me be very honest. There are very few people I come across that fail in the games industry because they run out of money, because they run out of knowledge, they're not smart enough, they're not good enough. You know how most people fail in this games industry? They fuck off because they can't take it anymore. That's it. 90% of the people that were there when I started 15 years ago that are now out of the games industry just had to go. Not for any other reason, but because they fucked themselves up doing it, right? So when it comes to burnout, when it comes to taking care of yourself, in 2013 I was making a game called Ridiculous Fishing. I'm sorry, I'll wrap it up after this story. I was doing a game called Ridiculous Fishing. It was my first hit game. I hadn't released a hit game at that point. And I worked myself to hell for it. Slept at the office, under a desk, all that bullshit. Did all of it. I was proud of it. I thought it was cool. It was the video game's dream, right? At least in 2013 it was. I hope it's not the dream anymore. And everything was going awesome. First game went great, second game went great, third game went great, and now we were on a fourth game, and this was going to be the one. This was going to be the big one, so we worked so fucking hard on it. And then this company from Indonesia stole the idea and released the game before we could. It was called Ninja Fishing. And it was a version of Ridiculous Fishing based on the Flash game prototype that we made several years earlier. And it was the first time anything had ever gone wrong in my career. 3 years in. 3 years in, it was the first time that anything went wrong. And it was a gut punch. It was like straight just getting punched in the stomach. And here's the thing. If I had been in good shape, I would have been able to take that punch. But I was not in good shape. I had not been sleeping. I had not had contact with my friends. I had been stressed, worrying about money, worrying about rent, worrying about everything, right? So I collapsed. I straight up collapsed. This was 3 years into my career, and I could genuinely, this sounds ridiculous when you say it, I could not touch a computer for like 6 months. Because the cursor, the blinking cursor, that would give me a headache. And not a small headache, big fucking headache, like split my head open headache. It's like the cursor was just like stabbing me in the face the entire time. I could barely write an email. It took 6 months. My doctor told me to not touch computers, don't check email, don't do any of that. Right? I had to for work, but I limited and I kept thinking like I would just work my way through it, and it got worse and worse until eventually I could barely do anything. Right? Could barely wake up in the morning. I was terrified. I've never been good at anything in my life. Just video games. Since I was 6, I've wanted to be a game developer. I worked my ass off for 15 years to get to the point where I was a professional game developer. I made my first little games, finally at the point in my career where I could fucking do it, and I was broken. 6 months, I was terrified that I would never touch a computer again. Six whole fucking months. You know how long 6 months is if you can't do the thing that you love doing? That's a very long amount of time. And after 6 months, I slowly got able to start working on a computer again. A company from Canada reached out to make a port of our game, send it to iOS. I didn't touch game development. They ported the game. That made us just enough money to keep the company going. But the amount of conversation we had about shutting down Vlambeer, never making Luftrausers, never making Nuclear Throne, never making those hit games that defined my career, defined my working games, never been able to travel around the world, never be able to talk to you. It was that close. And it was terrifying. You talk to people that have had burnout, you know this is not a thing you should be taking chances on. It's not worth it. No game you can ever make is going to be worth more than every game you could make in the future. So when it comes to burnout, really the only answer is take fucking rest. Just do it. It sounds really stupid. It sounds really simple, but set limits. 9 to 5, 9 to 5. You want to do 11 to 7, I don't care. But pick an amount of hours that you're going to work each day, work those hours, and take a fucking weekend. Doesn't have to be Saturday and Sunday. I don't care, but take a day off, right? Take 2 days off if you can, if you have the space for that, but take that time off. Because 90% of the people I know in games that have left over burnout. And I don't want to look at this room in 10 years and think, oh shit, only 10% of you are left because you've all fucking burned out. It's not going to be the money. It's really not. You're going to find ways to find money. It's not easy, but it's not that hard. But not burning out, that part is fucking hard. So, with that said, I don't think we have time for Q&A. So, if you have any questions, find me on Twitter, online, anywhere.
We have time for 1 or 2 questions.
Amazing!
Do we have any questions?
Hi, my name is Ibrahim. There's a question I want to ask you regarding, as an indie, like finding talent. I know there's a talent shortage right now, so if you are an indie, so what's the best practices like that you could do to find someone?
So really, the question is talent acquisition. There is a talent shortage, but the talent shortage is mostly in the senior position. So it really depends on what you're looking for. If you're looking for juniors, it's really not that hard. On the director level, surprisingly, easier than seniors. Seniors right now is the hardest thing you can find. So if you're looking for somebody with that 5 years of experience, 10 years of experience, that's relatively hard to find. The best things you can offer is you cannot offer competitive pay with any position that somebody could take at a Ubisoft or an EA. So if you're an independent developer, that's not where you want to get it. What I've found, if you want to get serious talent in an indie studio right now, look for people that are a bit further in their career. People that are 15, 20 years in, they've been in AAA for an extended period of time and they're looking for a place to jump ship to indie, right? You won't be able to offer them the same salary, but they usually have built up enough of a buffer that they could take a risk for 2 or 3 years, do an indie game, and then if it doesn't work out, go back to AAA. So try to adjust your profile for searching. I know a lot of people are looking for young seniors when they're looking to hire for indie level studios. So they're looking for people who have been here for like 5 years, 10 years. They're like, oh, they're not that far in their career that they're... But like if you can get people that have been here for a bit longer that might be looking for a change, that's a good place to look. In terms of acquisition, it's really just reach out. You just reach out to people. You could, if you have the funds, work with a recruitment agency. Some of them are really good. Some of them are just full of shit. So if you're going to look at a recruitment agency, see if you can find any earlier clients of theirs and have a chat with those clients about what kind of work they did and how they did it. When it comes to hiring, be picky. Just be really picky. Especially when it comes to hiring, your risk of hiring somebody that will mess up your team culture or your company culture, especially if you're a smaller team, it's relatively big. When a larger studio does it, they're dropping them into a team of 30, 40, 50 people, right? So if there's one asshole that you hire on the team, it's like 2% of the team has just turned into an asshole, right? But if you do it on a team of 5, you just turn 20% of your team into assholes, which is a lot bigger. So when it comes to hiring, don't just hire on their skill set, hire on their soft skills. How do they talk? How do they communicate? How do they deal with conflict? During the interview, ask them a question that they would disagree with, right? or a contentious topic. AI was actually a really good one, right? You hiring an artist? Well, ask about AI, right? And just say like, hey, just purely hypothetical. We're not saying we're going to be using it, but we just want to hear your opinions on AI, and see how they deal with that conflict, right? And then just whatever position they take, just take a slightly opposite one and see how that conversation goes. It helps. Knowing how people deal in conflict helps, because you will very often have very nice people, and then when stress happens, they turn into terrible people, right? So with hiring, don't just hire for what they're good at, hire at how they do it and how they work in a team. Does that answer your question? Wonderful. I have time for one more?
One quick more question.
One quick more question.
Hi. Right, so quick question, and I hope it will be quick answer. When we're talking about current market state, you said that indie games are the most difficult right now. So let's say there are 10 in terms of difficulty. How would you rate AA games and AAA games in terms of difficulty right now in the market?
In terms of the market?
Yeah.
All right, so AAA right now is in an interesting space. It's kind of coming back from the remote work situation that happened a while ago, but I would say that AAA is on its upswing again. We had a bit of a rough year. People think of last year as a really good AAA year. It was not a really good AAA year. There was a number of good AAA games, but it was so small that how many of you can list more than 5 AAA games that came out last year that were good? Just 5? Elden Ring, God of War, Horizon Forbidden West. That's kind of it, right? So AAA was not in a great spot last year. Like, yes, there is a slow increase in AAA, and I think over the next few years, we'll really see that upswing as the studios got used to remote work, and as the studios got used to this sort of new reality of making games, and also as some of the studios are forcing teams back into their offices, right? AA is really where the game is at right now. I think AA is currently the best place to be. It is a complicated place to be. It's obviously a lot more risky. It's a lot more dependent on getting that external funding, but if you have that external funding, it seems that the largest audience interest at the moment is with those sort of like mid-sized, high-fidelity, but indie spirit kind of games. So the Hadeses and games like that seem to be where it's at the moment. Mobile sort of stays outside of that. It is its entirely own thing. VR, same thing, it's its entirely own thing. But when it comes to AA and AAA, I think that's sort of the state of the industry. Okay, I think we're out of time.
Thank you very much,
Thanks so
Rami.
much.
Give a round of applause.